Shane Fernandez. Hi,
What's up, Brent?
how are you today?
I'm doing great. Not traveling, so that's good.
Yeah, wow, you're actually sticking around home there. Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. You're a busy man, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, the world of BMX is busy right now, especially. I just got back from LA, so it's there's a lot of things going on.
A lot of things going on indeed. And I guess part of the reason we were doing this podcast is because we had talked recently and you were telling me about something that you had going on that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm all ears.
Well, no, I appreciate that. It's interesting because I think and I've seen some of your podcasts too, right? When you're in the sport of BMX, and we're all passionate about BMX. It's interesting because we see it from a certain lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Myself included, you included. And it has been interesting because in the last 2 years, I've been able to see what others view BMX as that aren't as intimately engaged or knowledgeable about even what the sport is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, I thought, it'd be kind of fun to kind of show you some of the things I'm tracking and seeing within the industry and outside the industry, because the love for BMX is very real. And we're, even though you might not see it at a competition or, in a magazine or social media, I'm seeing it on different lenses that might not hit the radar of a BMXer, right?
Interesting. And I guess before we dive too deep into this, anyone who doesn't know should know you're Shane Fernandez, and what's your position in what you do?
I'm president and chairman of USA BMX. So that's Racing Freestyle US Canada and our foundation.
There you go. So your interests as that president include things like what?
So it's everything BMX. It's Hall of Fame, it's industry, it's events, our manufacturers, our partners, our sponsors. On the foundation side, it can be anything from at-risk kids who've never been on a BMX bike to X Games gold medalists, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then raising money for BMX. And some of the things we'll talk about today too is the architecture and development side of it.
Mm.
What we're seeing with some of the new facilities we're designing, because that's a pretty good indicator of where people are putting their money and what they believe in, right?
I see. And for anybody who wants more info on Shane, what he does, any of that stuff, I've done a podcast with you previously where it was just about you and learning about you. And then Google is also a thing where you can learn all that you could possibly want to hear. But I'm really interested in what you were talking about with digging in as far as data goes, because
Yeah.
anybody can sit here and say whatever they want to say about where BMX is at, not only as a sport, as an industry. Anybody can make any claims that they want to, but without hard data backing that up, who actually knows?
Right, right. Right, and that's true. So yeah, I thought I kind of wrote some categories, and I thought what we could do is just kind of run through them, and we'll start with what everybody knows: events, right? So we could start with that, and then I thought I might share some of the metrics we're seeing with our foundation. That's a different audience,
Yeah.
but what corporations and grants see when they look at BMX, the architecture and development side, what those metrics are showing. Yeah, and then just share some other things, just kind of randomly in terms of other things that I've seen that catch your eye, and you're like, huh,
Yeah.
yeah, this is kind of interesting, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, but if you want me, I can start off what we're seeing with the events.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, so really one of the things that I look at, and this sounds weird, but it's true. It's a good litmus test. So, right before COVID, our team likes to look at those membership numbers like right before COVID,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously during COVID, everything inflated
Yep.
and everybody went outside and stuff like that. So what we like to do is say, okay, how have we compared to that number? And what does that tell you, right? So the good news is, in terms of memberships, in terms of events, in terms of people participating, so we can just talk about race first, and then I'll hit freestyle, right?
Okay.
We're seeing that number, we've kept a large component of the COVID, what we call the COVID bubble, right? So a lot of sports, including us and industry, kind of anticipated that those numbers would inflate during COVID, but then they disappear after. That hasn't been the case. We are still holding on to a good portion of that percentage, which is great. The other interesting thing to see is kind of that rollover, right? There's kind of a magic number that we know if a novice races or if a novice does a national, we can look at a racer, actually even a freestyler too, and we can kind of say, all right, based on this data, if they've done this, this, and this, usually, they're engaged for 3 to 5 years, right? If they do this, this, and this, they're going pro, right? If they do this, this, and this, they're kind of a weekend warrior, right? Or we lose them, right?
Yeah.
But what's been interesting is that number, there's so much engagement of new talent within that number, right? It's not just those are the same numbers and we've just keeping them. There's people who's rolled off, but there's a lot of people who's come on, right? So that's a pretty good indication from a 300,000 foot view that shows us right away that at least from people who are passionate about BMX, that number's still there. Now you look at the freestyle side, this is kind of crazy because you and I, when we went back and talked a little bit about, when we launched this and what it was meant to be. And for those who don't know, our focus is actually the amateurs, right?
Yeah.
So of course we help and we've run C1s. We've done that to help USA Cycling and just to help the sport in general. We love doing that, but really, we're going out there and we're trying to, identify and engage the rider who doesn't know how to get into a group and activate, or parents who don't know how to get their rider into like a competitive, if they want to compete, get them into that series, how it works and things like that. So just on the start of that, and I don't have all the numbers from last year, but I can tell you roughly we're at about 3,000 entries just in these 3 years, which is great. What's interesting is you have two levels of engagement. You have, like the young kids like Huck, right? Mm-hmm. he's amazing because from the get-go, he's like, I'm going pro, and he's just on that track. Connor.
Been to every single stop for a physical contest since he started going to them.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. I mean, and he and their family, and we have a handful of our future pros that have been fun to watch, right? And they're all moving up, and we love that. The other thing that makes me really excited are all the kids that nobody sees, right? Yeah. So our digital competitions, it's pretty basic, right? But it's so cool that Brian Kaczynski judges these kids and they get feedback. And that has actually been amazing because what we learned is when trying to engage a freestyle rider, and I remember this, and I think you were there, we had that big festival at Woodward where we had racing and we had freestyle, we had an E-Series too, right? On the BMX track, or the racing track. But you go around and you talk to a lot of the freestyle riders, and some of them don't want to compete or they're a little intimidated, right? What we find is that they might not enter a live event, but they'll show up for the jam, and then we see them on the digital competitions because they're doing it at their own pace, right? And so I love that. I mean, that to me is success. And now, of course, I want that to grow because I want the Hucks of the world to have lots of people they can compete against and feed off each other. And but you also know too, at that level, right, that pyramid, that funnel starts tapering off once you start pushing. So no, I think that has been great. We've had 30 live events this year. It's kind of interesting. This year we've announced 4, We're actually working on more. We're working on something else, but we're not announcing it yet. But I can tell you, it's pretty cool.
I know the
So,
secret, and it's
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah, it is, right? So
Yeah.
and every year we try something different, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to get stagnant. So last year was really a focus on regional parks, um, because we were trying to get parks kind of to empower them, and we learned from that as well. They learned from that as well. How do we help a local park market to their community? Lots of lessons learned in that for us, and I also think for some of the parks. And then, of course, you have some parks that just kill it because they know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
But so that was interesting. Yeah, so this year we're switching up a little bit. But when the bigger announcement comes, it'll be pretty neat. I think the other fun thing we're doing too is we're going to bring back that King of Dirt at Grands.
Yeah.
So excited about that. I've been pushing for that, and I know that our team's really excited to do that as well. So that'll be fun.
So to go back to the 3,000 number, is that like cumulative 3,000 different people have entered since like 2020 in both physical and digital, or how's that?
Yeah, now the entry will show, like, for example, like a Huck, he'll show up multiple times in that number.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So what you're referring to is a unique, and I need to dig that up.
I
Right?
was just curious how that was actually figured.
I will say actually, of that number, the uniques are a smaller percentage
Mm-hmm.
because we have a smaller percentage of riders on the amateur level that can have the ability to go to these events, and they got that family structure and everything else, right?
Right.
So I would say that's a smaller percentage of that number. Most of these are one-timers, maybe two-timers. We kind of laugh when we see a new face at an event. We've come up with different price points so they can go if we ask them, it's like, hey, are you wanting to go after a national title, or are you just wanting to have fun today? And so we have different things where they can engage and they don't feel that pressure, and then they can build up. What we're seeing a lot is that a trend of where they start off on like a one-day jam session, and then they show up at another one, and then pretty soon they start rolling in. So
Yeah.
and I think this is just one of these things that really proud of our team, but really thankful for the parents that have, especially the ones that are pushing their kids and these younger riders to move forward. I remember one of my favorite stories. I remember Brady Baker. I think he was like 15 or something. I can't remember. He was young. And now we're sitting there and we're seeing him on X Games Gold multiple times.
Right. I mean, you think about it, was 5 years ago was that first championship at Woodward where we had to open the doors to even be allowed to do it in December.
Right. Yeah. So no, so we're seeing, obviously that's a Brady and a Huck, right? Those are guys that just have natural talent, and they were always going to be really good, right?
Yeah.
I think when you and I first spoke about this, one of the things I really wanted to do was just find that dark horse, right? The one no one knows about.
Mm-hmm.
If 3 or 4 or 5 or a handful of those riders come out of this, which we've seen, those are the cool stories.
Yeah, and I want to highlight a shining example of like both providing the infrastructure for attaining like this national title, but then with what Huck and his family have done like with that national title is a testament to like what I think all of BMX and action sports in general needs to learn, in that you guys can provide the infrastructure to win that title, but you can't make someone or tell someone what to do once they've earned it. And so what Huck and his family have done is taken that national title and turned it into being associated with news and newspapers and giving bikes away through Huffy to Ronald McDonald House. And all of it comes down to this thing that like some people see as like, oh, it's this like just this little championship belt that at the end of the year, cool, I I traveled all these things and I got a championship belt. It's like, well, you can look at the Olympics the exact same way in that the riders don't get paid, but it's what, and talk about athletes in general, they don't get paid by the Olympics, but it's what they do with that achievement that propels them forward. And I think Huck and his family is just the example of bringing it all together.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, and you know it was so cool to watch how that started, right? I mean, just every year how it grows and grows, and now, you know, when I'm able to, I'm not traveling, I'm able to make it to an event. It's like, hey, and all these kids are getting bigger, right?
yeah,
But it's interesting, you know. Connor Fields, the gold medalist in racing, he does a great speech, and he was at our headquarters, and you know, during one of his speeches, he talks about that gold medal. And his question is, now what, right? And
yep.
how that's a guiding principle for him. And you know, you see it like with Huck and his family and others who really become an ambassador to the sport outside of the events and outside of the competitions.
You can't rely on anybody else to do it for you. And none of these incredible things in life in general happen on their own.
Yeah.
It happens very, very rarely on its own. It is usually a driving force and someone consciously realizing and making these calculated moves for these incredible things to happen. So I don't want to get too hung up on this side of things, but it's just the example of like, you guys made this infrastructure and then now there's people who are using it as leverage.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I think, and this doesn't even go to that, you know, our Hall of Fame museum, right? So we've had, which is crazy, in the 2 years we've opened our headquarters, we've had 125,000 people come through there. Right?
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. So, and you have to imagine, it's not just events, right? We've had 70 events there that have nothing to do with BMX because people. So this is a metric, right? People book our place because they love it. And then you ask, why do they love it? Well, it's because, and I've literally had senators come in and they walk into the Hall of Fame and they haven't even seen the track or anything like that. Hall of Fame's first. And they see a Schwinn Stingray or they see the old Mongoose, right? Or whatever it is, a Skyway. And I will tell you, in my opinion, I think 98%, and I actually use this line when I speak to the general public on a business or political level that have nothing to do with BMX. I think most people are BMXers. They just forgot, right? No, and it's true because I remember I did a speech, it was about 500 people, and I said, okay, before I start, how many of you know what BMX is? And a few people raised their hand, right? And I said, okay, let's rewind this. So I showed the picture of that Stingray and that Mongoose. I said, how many of you learned how to ride a bike that was either one of these or something similar? A bunch of hands come up.
Right.
I said, all right, how many of you jumped off a curb? Remember that feeling? Or did a skid or race your friend or crash and got back up, right? Or went further than your parents told you could go, rode with no hands. And they're all smiling. I go, you're BMXers, you just forgot. So I use that as a metric because when you start seeing the proof and what I'm getting ready to tell you, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
BMX, people relate to BMX way more than we realize because so many people ride a bike, but so many people started on a BMX bike. Now, they may not have been, you know, dropping into pools or hitting doubles or triples, but they understand the freedom and that resilience and the independence that BMX brings, right?
Yeah.
And so that's relevant because when you think about BMX, if I'm talking endemically and you look at sponsors, right? And if I say, all right, or your viewers are sitting there and you think about a BMX sponsor, somebody in their head are thinking about different manufacturers in the BMX realm, right? Yep. When you talk about the spirit of BMX or the culture of BMX, one of the things that I've seen is the corporate support for the sport through dollars, which indicates that they believe in what BMX can do to transform somebody's life, right? So it can be through education, it can be through resilience, it can be through wellness, exercise, multiple different things, right? But the number in 2 years of corporations, in terms of what they've done at one facility, those numbers exceed seven figures in terms of their belief and their support to get kids on bikes, BMX bikes, right? Of that, within that one facility, at our Tulsa facility, we had roughly 5,000 new kids on bikes that have never been on BMX bikes before. Now, some of them have, right? But that have come through the facility for a camp, for some kind of program, through some kind of training, and through different venues and avenues, right? And corporations are paying for them to be there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, excuse me, that number in itself, to me, is something I just want the BMX world to hear, because, you know, I understand COVID threw a lot of our manufacturers into disarray. With they are either overstocked or they're understocked. We're seeing the rise of e-bikes and things like that. I do not think BMX is slowing down. I actually think it's gaining momentum from what I can see.
I think as a activity and something that people do, absolutely. But in terms of like industry, that's where and that's why you absolutely just have to learn how to separate the activity of BMX from the industry of BMX, because when you talk about them like side by side, that
Right.
it's not the same. Like you can say one thing and talk about BMX, best it's growing and all of this stuff, but then it doesn't apply to the industry. You're like, well, this doesn't compute. And it's because they're not the same.
Yep. And you're right. One of the things that I don't know if I'll pull it off in my lifetime, but there's a term the team and I have been using internally, and it's the BMX ecosystem. Okay. So it's a model that's starting to happen, and you're seeing success across all fronts of how this works. And I think it's going to keep growing. But the idea and the premise is, okay, if we're seeing indicators from corporations that like the activity of BMX, right? And we know that there's funding through grants, which we've proven. And we know that once a kid gets on a bike, they are either going to go to freestyle or they're going to go to race. They may go to mountain biking, right? But one of the things that we're starting to do is, within those models, can we then turn that funding around and support and purchase bikes, purchase helmets from the manufacturers themselves? So it becomes a perpetual ecosystem that feeds itself, because what you're seeing is, which we haven't approached in the past like this, but it's the numbers are showing it. If we approach it from the activity side and we structure that business model in a certain way, over time, it will, and if we can attract those dollars and kids, we'll grow the sport and we'll be able to feed back into the manufacturers with a financial model, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really striving to do. The other thing that we're seeing, so let's look at the architecture side.
Yeah.
So in that world, it's called master planning, right? So a city calls, they said, this is a basic example. We love what you did in Tulsa. How does that work? How'd you do it? How's it funded? How'd you build it? Who designed it? Right? So we do that now, everything. And as you know, I did the Tulsa HQ. And so I call that, if you've seen Iron Man, that's our Mark I version. Right?
Yeah.
So Mark II, we have right now, and this is crazy, I think over 10 active projects with facilities. And guess what are the three things they all have? They all have freestyle, racing, and the foundation. Because those facilities will then create their own ecosystem, and we can get to what we were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
That model that feeds itself, that perpetual model. We have 700 sports tourism executives coming at the end of April to our headquarters.
Wow.
From 700 cities. We have 40 other cities in queue to learn more about BMX. And now this is not pump, this is BMX, right?
Yeah.
The other thing we've done politically is that I'll be the chairman of National Parks and Rec for their Innovation and Business Initiative, which is that'll be 2026 and 27. And what that means, Brad, is that we're educating park directors on what BMX can do. And it provides, yes, I mean, pump tracks are awesome. BMX, when it's structured, you can get the foundation programming. That community can get the corporate dollars and the grants, and then their activities can generate economic impact and active revenue for the parks, right? So you're seeing the Parks and Rec, just on those numbers I was telling you, and sports and tourism, they're starting to dive into BMX. And the numbers of construction dollars that cities are putting forward to under contract right now is 150 million.
Wow.
So, yeah. So again, these are the type of things I love to share with BMXers, because there is an audience, and the audience is understanding more and more and believing in the sport and the power it has. Right?
And what I'm getting from this is that this is something that is only achievable because you guys are getting this data that you can take to them, and you're not taking I'm just going to say this. You're not taking the typical BMXer's approach to business or anything of, well, I'm just going to ride my bike and hope that something good happens. And right. You guys are, and you're doing what the industry, both in the racing and freestyle sides, can't really do, because they have to focus on not like staying in business, selling bike parts.
Right.
And also just, I feel, don't exactly have the same, like, I don't want to say capacity, I'm trying expanse of like thinking universally that large, where you're focusing so hard on just staying in business and being able to sell bike parts that you don't even have time to be like, well, how do I go to 700 local cities and try and get them to build skate parks, because it's going to help people buy bikes and that's going to make my business work.
Well, you hit it right on the head, right? And this is what I always say. We were literally, you're right. We have 40 years of metrics, and now with some of the technology we have, where we can track activation at each one of the properties, right, in North America, and we can share that with a municipality, it changes their perception of why BMX matters, right? And you said it perfectly, because usually the magic, the trifecta you want in a room, if you're going to go talk about BMX at a city, is you want the parks director, you want sports and tourism, and then either the mayor or a city planner, right, or the city manager. But each one of them is going to look at BMX from a different lens of why they think it's valuable. Sports and tourism, they want those metrics of who's our nearest competition, how much money, or how many people flew into their city to do your events all last year, right? For example, Okehili, their track out in Florida was the #1 track in the United States, and they've done a great job. They turned a track that was, running okay and made it amazing. And I think they had 60,000 people at their facility.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's insane. So we're able to talk about exactly what that area is doing now, but then what it can do. Then the Parks Department, especially now with a lot of grants being on the federal level, things are getting cut. The discussion and the communication of making sure that a park is economically feasible and can create revenue to offset its expenses and maintenance, huge. Yeah. And BMX checks that box, right? And it gets kids outside. It gets people off their screens. It's accessible, right? It's out in the sun. And if I'm talking about accessibility, I can show the RISE program, right? That's our nonprofit that gets at-risk youth and underserved communities on bikes. And I can show that metric and the fact that, three of those kids podiumed at Grands last year, and they'd only been in. Yeah. And we're moving that program to the freestyle side, right? So it's, yeah, man, it's, and then if that park believes in it, which they have been, and the city goes, okay, we're going to invest in this facility. How do we activate it? We're like, oh, schools, events, foundation, donors come in, benefactors come in, and we're like, okay, hey, this program, we're going to buy all these bikes from this manufacturer. We're going to get all these helmets. These bikes last a year, so we'll donate them back, but then the next year we'll get a grant to purchase more. That's what I'm envisioning. And I think too, man, the next 3 years for our sport, with LA 28, with racing and freestyle being on our home turf, at least in my lifetime, this will be the most pivotal year for everyone to get aligned, collaborate, and just hit it hard, because it's the excitement of BMX is it's already happening from what I'm seeing. But you dangle that carrot of LA 28 out there, and people are just it's like adding gasoline to a fire, right? A passion. It just it grows and grows. So I think we have the next 3 years are going to be amazing. I hope that we can keep it growing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity that will be available once in however long. It's not going to be there again for years and years after that, that you definitely should take advantage of, because this is something that can help bring money into BMX from not the industry side of things. Like that, I think, is such an important factor for everyone to realize. And what you're talking about is that, like, yeah, a petition with 2,000 signatures that a bunch of local BMX riders and skaters got together and formatted is amazing. But until you can take that petition and then show the city planner and the mayor and the parks department data like what you're talking about, it's way, way harder for it to go from that petition to them being like, oh yeah, sure, we'll throw 250 grand at a skate park. But then you take the numbers like what you're talking about in an infrastructure that's like, no, we've done this before. We know you need to know these numbers, and then this is what you need to take action on this so you can more likely make it happen.
Yeah, no, and you're exactly right. I mean, that's the key, right? And I'm doing a big presentation in Durango next week, and it's got, that park is awesome. It's got mountain biking, it's got adaptive use, and BMX is a portion of it. So you think about this, I got 5 minutes. What am I going to say, right? I got 5 minutes. And what I'm going to say is, this is what BMX is. Why does it matter? And let me show you how it's going to impact your community, right? And it's the data. So it's half passion, right? Making sure and trying to align and reminding everybody that they rode a bike one time too.
Yeah.
Probably like one of these. And then the data. And that's what gets it, right?
The data is everything in that. And I think until the industry side of things understand that and really start to try to push, like, yeah, you might not have a way to gather that data for yourself, but if you start marketing BMX, both racing and freestyle, and any segment of it, to people who don't ride already, then how are you gonna, if all you're marketing to is people who already have bikes, then how, your industry can't grow intentionally. It's just accidental, and whoever happens to find it. But if you target like what you're doing in that, and like you guys aren't even the industry side of things, but you're targeting ways to grow that whole industry pie.
Yeah. That's it was. I've had several CEOs of manufacturing, BMX manufacturers, reach out. Some small, some really big, and it's they want to hear what I'm seeing, and I tell our team, and you need to, because we're BMX, right? But I said, we're so good at telling our story to ourselves, right?
Damn, that's good.
Which is great. I love that, right? Because if you're a BMXer, hell yeah. However, to grow the sport, we got to share the story and get other people to want to be a part of it, right? So, so some of these manufacturing CEOs, I share some of this data too, in hopes that it helps them, reinvigorates what BMX is, especially as they're having all these questions about, it's interesting. Some of these business leaders aren't BMXers, right? They're like, okay, well, we got e-bikes, and we got BMX for freestyle and racing, and mountain bikes, and so I tell them about the power of BMX and as the foundation of all cycling, right?
Yes.
But yeah, for me, it's great to hear what they see, right? So it's interesting when they zero in on facilities,
Yeah.
right? Like, well, hold on. So where are these facilities going? And you can see them kind of putting the parts and pieces, or kind of creating the puzzle pieces of connect the dots of, well, where's our nearest store? And can we activate on that track? And wait, your foundation in one facility got 5,000. Are you taking that program, that blueprint, and sharing it with other tracks? Yes, we're starting to. But as this grows, now those manufacturers, I can say, okay, what we did in Tulsa, I'm launching in these two cities. And we can then share that with the manufacturers so they know what's coming, and make sure we're plugging them in as well, right? So some of that is really cool, kind of like when you and I spoke about the freestyle thing. 2 years ago, it was an idea. It's rolling now, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think in my career, I think there's going to be a lot of momentum, and just with LA 28 coming up, we'll see that ramping up, because it's happening already.
Yeah. So, as the average rider, or even a bike shop or a company, like what steps do they take for some, like, can they get involved? Can somebody who wants to try and do this in their city, or see how this type, like, how does that work?
Yeah. So in terms of getting a facility, or
Just talking and brainstorming about growing BMX in an area.
yeah, no, that's a good point. So there's different ways. I would say one of the ways they can do that is they could reach out to one of us, our staff, right? So on the USA BMX website. So Justin Travis with our team,
Yeah.
is the guy when it comes to brainstorming about BMX in a city, especially in that locale. That's one of the quickest and easiest ways to do it. He has metrics that, if anybody ever needs them, that are so detailed. And I always tell them, hey, we got to keep it simple on the first few. And if somebody wants to know all the percentage of soil mixture and dirt or concrete rebar, right, for bowls and freestyle, we can do that. But no, I think you start there. The other thing too is, we see so much great ideas. Our team kind of polls, just social media, right? When you have a group that's coordinated, if there's a good idea, even if it's a valid complaint, which, believe it or not, we get, right? The team will bring it up. So those don't go unnoticed. And the other thing too is, you'll be surprised how many of our team get just emails, right? Or messages on Instagram or Facebook as well, about ideas from people, and then we channel them to the right person. So that's the easiest. One of the other things too, as you know, on the freestyle side, is we love those digital comps, just because we get the kids that are too scared to, or parents who don't know what they're doing, and when we're able to engage and communicate with a young rider that's never done this before, and they get feedback, and I'll never forget, a couple of years ago, I had a family call me, and one of their child had submitted a video on a homemade pipe system, a ramp system they had on a farm.
Yeah.
The kid was awesome. He placed, right? But the father called, and he was just like, hey, he goes, we have no idea, if he's good or not. I'm like, yeah, he's pretty good. Brian Kaczynski says so, right?
Yeah.
But so there's that too, or whether it's a racetrack as well. The other powerful thing too, I think, for BMXers to remember, are schools.
Yeah.
Because when schools start understanding, so that sounds really far-fetched. Here in Tulsa, we have 20 schools now that have teams.
Mm,
And we have one school that's made BMX an elective curriculum.
wow.
How cool is that, right?
Yeah.
And we have curriculum we put into the school that gets them accredited for STEM education, but it ties BMX into it. But getting a school on their side to talk about the value of what a BMX bike can do is also huge.
Yeah, yeah. So we hear all of this and we talk about the BMX ecosystem and data and numbers and all of these things. And I'm sure hearing that as just like an individual and be like, well, so what? Or what can I do? Or things of that nature. So I go back to the Connor Fields thing. Now what?
Right. Yeah, I think now what they get to, especially if they can get, if they're passionate enough about this, they're organized enough about this, and even if they have one champion, whether it's in the city, the park, or sports tourism, that wants to hear them out, um, we can help them get those numbers for that facility,
Yeah.
specifically for that facility. And I would say, really, of the three sports tourism, those executives, those are the ones that react the quickest because when they see, I'll give you an example. I think Rock Hill, the one week they had the racing, or the 9 days they had the racing world championships. I think the economic impact of BMX in that city was $44 million.
Jeez.
Yeah, BMX.
That's
Okay.
incredible.
Yeah, and you take a look at our national series, right? Just on the racing side, one of those is, roughly on average 2.5 to 4 million for that city in 3 days. So that grabs people's attention.
Mm-hmm. It ultimately what it sounds to me is like would be a message of thinking bigger and more forward,
Yep.
5 years into the future type thinking and working towards that. And I feel like our conversation today is a message of just like positivity.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks, really. And I say this at every presentation I do that art is BMX specific. Everything I just mentioned to you I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm just telling the stories. I'm telling your story. I'm telling our Hall of Fame stories. I'm telling Huck's story. I'm telling the story of the kid who entered a jam and we've never seen him again, right? Or her again.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story of BMX. So it's our culture has created this momentum. We just haven't told the story the way we're doing it now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. It's cool to hear from your perspective what you guys are doing because you're essentially doing what I've been trying to say that BMX as like an industry needs to do in that like finding ways to reach people who don't already ride.
Right. That's right. And we say it internally, and you use the same term I put on a slide, and my team's sick of hearing it. I put these
Normies.
think bigger, right? But it's getting kids on bikes, and then we modify it, get kids on BMX bikes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's that because out of that, that's why we focus so hard on the amateur side and support our elite riders for sure. But we focus so hard on that amateur draw and just try to get them excited because once they're in, I mean, you get it, I get it. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. It's freedom. So is this the kind of thing that people would pay attention to or anything like that? Or is this just kind of like a PSA of like, hey, we're doing it and BMX is in a good place as an activity?
Yeah, I think it's there's no hidden agenda. It's just like, hey, thanks to everybody because this momentum is based on their love and the culture they've created over the years and decades, right? But also too, if you've got 5 of your listeners that heard one thing that arms them with a new tool
Mm,
to go engage or change their community or get some more kids on bikes, heck yeah, man, that's what we got to do.
and I think the way I would close this out is for those people, awesome. And BMX is our experience of BMX is exactly what we make of it and want it to be. And if you are aligned, if what you want aligns with everything we just talked about, go for it. But if you're the kind of person that wants to go and just ride street and you don't care about any of this, or you
Yeah.
see it and you're like, ugh, Olympics, ugh, contests, well then
Right.
guess what? You can keep doing that. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
affect you. It is what you make it. And
Yeah.
it's that simple, I think.
And all they got to do is go tell the story of why they love their bike. That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. So I appreciate you reaching out, wanting to give me like a positive like
Absolutely.
message of this.
Well,
And
Brent, you've been a
yeah,
champion all along for a lot of the things we're doing were ideas that as you and I have talked, I've really took to heart because I'm aligned with a lot of the way you think. So appreciate what you do for the sport, and yeah, anything we can do to help. We're not going to get it perfect. We never will, but we are tenacious, and we're gonna keep going. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and thank you.
thanks, Brent.
Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah.